Hi everybody, Rad Mom here. Welcome back to the garden on this lovely late spring evening. The sun's going down, but we'll see if the light will cooperate with us. I know that we were talking about a video featuring Jesse Gender. The trouble with that being that I cannot stand that man for more than like 60 seconds. Fortunately, I happened upon something that is extraordinarily relevant to all the stuff that we've been discussing in the live streams and the themes of my book. So, thank you so much for joining me this evening out here in my lovely garden spot. Our guest tonight is a fellow from the Living Philosophy, who could be Jesse Gender's homely older cousin. And I hate to be shallow, but I apologize in advance. He's all right to listen to, but this fellow is quite striking visually. Now that we've covered that, what he has to say is really interesting, and he comes at the topic of feminism from an interesting perspective that is a lot like the one that I come from, but he's pretty confused about a couple of key points that we're going to try and clear up tonight. So yeah, thanks again for joining me, Rad Mom, out here in the garden, and we're going to be talking to the Living Philosophy tonight.
The term feminism, as we use it today, first appeared in the 1837 work of the utopian socialist Charles Fourier.
Oh, that's right. I thought that was funny. At least according to this fellow, the word feminism was actually coined by a man in the first place in 1837. So there's a little point of interesting trivia there.
The Oxford Dictionary defines it as advocacy of the rights of women based on the theory of equality of the sexes. In this episode, we're exploring the idea that this feminism has been misnamed. We're going to be distinguishing between true feminism and the historical women's movement, which we'll be calling womanism. This new feminism will be a movement centered not on the female sex, but on the feminine itself, and on the currently disregarded values of femininity.
Disregarded feminine values, that's a thing. And I'm saying I say quite often that we should talk about this stuff. That'd be nice. But, he actually goes on to illustrate why separating these two things, like concretely and, discrete, completely separating these two things, femaleness and femininity, is impossible. But we'll get there.
First thing to establish then is what we mean by femininity as distinct from the female sex, and who better to speak about such things than a straight white male.
So he does have a sense of humor. That's always nice. And again, an Irishman without a sense of humor wouldn't be an Irishman, right? I'm married to one, so I can say stuff like that. But, this is a bunch of dudes, right? All dudes. Talking about femininity as distinct from the female sex, which they fucking love to do. Pretty sure they're the ones who made up all that stuff about dresses and long hair and long nails and makeup and stuff. Okay, because real femininity that is essentially tied to femaleness, which we shall see in a moment, has, a lot more to do with, blood and guts, doesn't it? Really not very girly at all.
The idea that femininity and masculinity can be separated from their associated sexes is an idea that has a long history in Chinese philosophy.
Oh my god, and we're actually going to go ahead and skip a lot of the ancient philosophy stuff. I don't give a fuck what the hell ancient Chinese dudes said about femininity, do you?
Something that is intuitively grasped in language. In the English language, we have words like effeminate and mannish that have long been applied to people who do not fit the gender role stereotypes of their culture. There are some men who are more feminine than many women, and some women that are more masculine than many men. And while masculinity and femininity are obviously more correlated with their connected sexes, every person has some admixture of both in their psyche.
Right. There is no perfect woman or perfect man. No one is perfectly either, representative of either cluster of traits. It's a group thing. That doesn't mean that you get to separate them entirely, though, because if you do that, what the fuck are we talking about?
The BEM Sex Role Inventory, or BSRI,
Get ready for a bunch of stereotypes.
is a tool that has been used for the study of gender role perceptions in the social sciences since its development by American psychologist Sandra Bem in the 1970s. The inventory asks subjects to rate themselves between 1 and 5 on a number of traits. These traits are divided up into 3 categories: feminine, masculine, and neutral. Based on the responses, the BSRI determines the masculinity and femininity of a particular individual. As we might expect, the BSRI has come under some scrutiny in the 21st century, but it still stands as an effective diagnostic tool in the study of gender roles, and so it's not a bad place to distinguish between masculine and feminine traits. On the BSRI, we find the following traits associated with masculinity: assertive, analytical, willing to take risks, dominant, acts as a leader, individualistic, competitive, ambitious. And the following traits associated with femininity: yielding, cheerful, shy, affectionate, compassionate, soft-spoken, gullible, loves children.
I feel like not all of those traits in those 2 categories are equivalent, are they? Where's the equivalent to loves children in the masculine category? These, clusters are still familiar to us, and they are based on something, which we're about to see here in a second.
Another way of looking at these differences comes from the work of the human behavior researcher Helen Fisher, who studied the correlation between neurochemicals and character traits.
Neurochemicals and character traits, aka psychology, right? That's the mechanism behind psychology.
The 2 relevant profiles for our purposes are the male sex hormone testosterone and the female sex hormones, the estrogens. In this research, we find the following traits associated with the female sex hormones. People who are expressive of the estrogen system tend to be intuitive, introspective, holistic, imaginative, trusting, empathetic, and contextual long-term thinkers. They are sensitive to people's feelings and typically have good verbal and social skills. These people are negotiators. They're big picture thinkers, tolerate ambiguity well, have mental flexibility, and strong executive social skills. They're highly emotionally intelligent.
Now those are traits. Thank you, Helen. Dr. Fisher. That's what I've been talking about for a while too. I wrote a blog post about female psychology and how it does in fact exist. On a group scale, yeah, women exist. Who knew? Men did. Patriarchy did. And that's one of my favorite parts about this video, is this fella actually gives a pretty decent breakdown of what the fuck patriarchy is. He uses it as basically a not all men, but we're not going to use it that way.
We've put together a picture of what we mean by the feminine. Let's talk about a new formulation of feminism. In essence, I'm suggesting that 20th century women have been living for centuries in a male-oriented culture, which has kept them unconscious of their own feminine principle. Now, in their attempt to find their own place in a masculine world, they have unknowingly accepted male values. Goal-oriented lives, compulsive drivenness, and concrete bread which fails to nourish their feminine mystery. Marion Woodman, the owl was a baker's daughter.
Yes, that's exactly what I've been saying. I obviously need to read this book. Because it was a pretty good source for this guy. And I have a feeling that I would love it. But so, yeah, no notes.
And when you look at the collective side of our industrialized culture through the lens of the masculine and the feminine, it becomes patently obvious that we live in a hyper-masculinized society.
Thank you. Thank you. And he goes on to explain that in a masculine value system, men are just overall going to fare better. And there it is. It's patriarchy in a nutshell, everybody. Yay!
In the values landscape of industrial society, it is masculine values that dominate. This is the general direction that the term patriarchy is pointed in. The trouble with the term patriarchy is that it runs into the same problem of conflating men and masculinity and females and femininity. The Oxford Dictionary defines patriarchy as a society, system, or country that is ruled or controlled by men. In a masculine values landscape, it is inevitable that on average, men will come out on top.
Right. And he has shown graphs and already given us statistics as to why the masculine values are inseparable on a group scale from men. So, why are you running in the other direction, dude?
While both men and women partake of masculinity and femininity, at scale, masculine traits are more correlated with males and feminine traits are more correlated with females. As such, in a landscape that is organised according to masculine values, men have a statistical advantage and are more likely by the setup of the landscape to come out on top.
Yeah, so why is the answer to, separate women from their values?
Historically, the women's movement has sought to overcome this. The basis for this movement has been the idea of the equality of the sexes. The womanist movement felt that women were being kept out of the workplace and places of power because of historical oppression. The direction of this oppression was seen to be men over women, but this, as we are arguing here, merely obscures the real depth and nature of the problem.
The real depth and nature of the problem being that femininity has been oppressed in favor of masculinity. The two clumps of traits that are inexorably associated with the two sexes. Gee, I wonder why and how they did that. Historical oppression has been of women by men, yes. And part of that has been the denigration of all things associated on a large scale with women. Okay? And so then in order to become fully fledged members of the wider society, women as individuals and as a group had to then reject these things as well. Okay? Rather than being allowed to bring them with us. To the point that now we don't even know what they were, really. I've had conversations with women about this, and we're like, yeah, feels like we were talking about something, essentially. It's fucking dreadful. Okay? And I'm kind of angry about it. And as I said, these are a lot of the themes of my book that I'm working on editing now. Wish me luck on that, oh my god. And I just happened upon this one, so, I figured Jesse Gender can kind of wait. I don't think he's going anywhere. This is exactly the kind of stuff that we've been talking about. Yes, we need to assert feminine values, as I said, and women's psychological needs and values, the things that we are interested in. It's that thing about how teenage girls can never have a serious interest. Anything that teenage girls are interested in is automatically laughed at. I made it to a joke. Because no teenage girl ever had a serious thought in her head in all of history, obviously. Stuff like that. We need to fix stuff like that. How exactly is separating us even further from the concept of femininity going to fucking do that?
All of this brings us to the real crux of the argument. The historical movement that we call feminism has not actually been feminism at all. This historical movement that in this episode we're calling womanism achieved a big shift in the organization of society, but not in the collective value system. Womanism brought women more and more into the masculine value system. The integration of women into the masculine value sphere was the ultimate victory for what we might call masculinism.
They just kind of assumed that women would bring their differences along with them. And took for granted the nature of what woman was. They didn't think we could learn? Apparently, I don't know. It brought us into a masculine value system, and this is what I've been saying. We don't even know who we are anymore or what we are anymore. It's fucking tragic.
By framing it as a problem of women versus men, womanism unwittingly validated the culture's value distribution.
And I've said this a lot too. Okay? We assume male is the default still. We're like, no, we're as good as you. Which, true, but that's the wrong way to frame the argument.
It affirmed the value of competitiveness, of ambition, and of dominance, and it argued that women are just as competent in these traits as men. And so, what womanism ended up doing was initiating women into a masculinist value structure, a landscape where their gender-correlated traits are punished rather than rewarded. The post-womanist world has never been so masculinist. Sure, a few more of those with power and influence are women, but the value structure is exactly the same.
The value structure is even worse, I would argue. You know, having been endorsed by generations of women, I would say has actually made the problem worse.
Womanism consummated industrial society's apotheosis of masculine values.
Wow. Consummate. What a choice of words there, eh?
Womanism consummated industrial society's apotheosis of masculine values while putting the final nail in the coffin of feminine values.
But I wholeheartedly agree with this sentiment. That by buying into, the industrial capitalist modern society thing, feminism cut off our nose to spite our face, or worse, even. But, that's not a fucking women's movement. Anyway, he already said that it's a masculinist movement, is his words. Which, yeah, we've been saying that for a long time too, haven't we?
The entire thrust of womanism ended up being
The entire thrust. Damn, dude.
not a revaluation of the feminine, but an initiation of women into a masculine paradigm. But, we should hastily add, there was no other option. There was no way the women's movement could have brought about a revaluation of the feminine, given the lack of power that women had, and it was unlikely to be instigated by men given the cultural perceptions of women's inferiority.
There was no way that they could have brought about a revaluation. For what? The vote? Bank accounts? Pants? What was the magical moment at which women became able to, spur on cultural change in regards to our role in society? When was that? I don't remember him clarifying that. I'd really like to. There's a thesis for you, right? Damn. But I'm not sure it's actually happened.
Perhaps then the revaluation of the feminine could be more accurately portrayed as the consummation of womanism.
There's that word again.
As a new wave in the movement where, as women got more power, they could work towards a revaluation of the value system itself. This is in fact exactly what happened. In the 1980s and 90s, the equality versus difference debate was a major battleground in the women's movement. Ultimately, however, the equality camp who argued for the similarities between men and women won out, and so-called difference feminism fell out of all favour.
Why? Why did difference feminism fall out of all favor? What happened? Because the funny thing about that is the differences did not go away. And I don't know. I would really like to talk about them.
And so, rather than affirming the value of feminine traits, rather than valorizing care, community, cooperation and connection, womanism abandoned feminine values. And so, we live in a society that's become completely imbalanced towards one way of viewing the world, the masculinist value structure.
And the abandonment of these values has robbed us of a lot of knowledge. Just all kinds of cultural stuff just gone. And the older I get, the more I feel it. It's kind of weird.
Unsurprisingly, the total dominance of the masculinist value structure has quickly led to cracks appearing in the foundations of society. In his 2002 work, Authentic Happiness, the father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, noted that mounting over the last 40 years in every wealthy country on the globe, there has been a startling increase in depression. Depression is now 10 times as prevalent as it was in 1960.
This whole extra prevalence of depression thing makes me wonder if that isn't what happens when everybody goes around suppressing their feelings all the time. Because I've heard that depression is anger turned inwards. So, food for thought, right?
And it strikes at a much younger age. The mean age of a person's first episode of depression 40 years ago was 29 and a half, while today it is 14 and a half years. This is a paradox since every objective indicator of well-being, purchasing power, amount of education, availability of music and nutrition, has been going north, while every indicator of subjective well-being has been going south. How is this epidemic to be explained? The reactionary will respond to this by talking about the decline in family values. This discourse contains a nostalgia for the good old days when men went out and worked and women stayed at home. That is one way of viewing the revaluation, but it is probably the least imaginative.
The least imaginative. Thank you, man. Thank you. Because surely we could come up with something more creative moving forward than going backwards. It's worth pulling things from the past with us that work and experimenting with them. Like, not talking about, wholesale adopting antiquated belief systems. That's stupid.
Denigration of the feminine didn't start in the 20th century. It started somewhere close to 10,000 years ago with the redistribution of power in the culture as agricultural societies replaced horticultural societies.
With agriculture, y'all. Think about how long ago that was. This, to me, feels like the tail end. Like he said, the final nail in the coffin of industrial capitalism, okay? The tail end of a very long, repetitive story. Okay? Wherein we have realized what's been going on and we've tried to, in one way or another, and tried to, assert our humanity. And this time it's just been decided, fine, you're human. You're just like us. Yeah. No, that's not what we fucking meant either. Jeez.
At that time, we can see the shift in the pantheons of such cultures, from great mother cultures to the more patriarchal religions that we are familiar with. The feminine has been on the back foot for a very, very long time. The last half of the 20th century has merely been the final straw in a slow but steady process. The mental health crisis isn't the only major symptom of this nadir of the feminine. The links to the ecological crisis are obvious, and one could also argue that the meaning crisis could be seen as the consummation of centuries of de-emphasis on the feminine.
Phrasing!
Masculine values have taken such precedence in their striving upward that the earth and this life have lost all their meaning. The sense of embodied meaning and connection to the world around us has been lost in the desensitized realm of the masculine until we have been left treading water in the nihilistic void. In this sense, Nietzsche's Dionysian revaluation of all values can be seen as a feminine revaluation.
I love that idea of Nietzsche as feminine. Mr. Superman.
It's an affirmation of the joys and tribulations of life as they are, and a recognition of the sacredness of the world as it is, rather than needing to apply a metaphysical filter to make it more appealing.
And this is what I'm always saying too. Like, you do not need to invoke Jesus to justify your life choices. And if you do, maybe you should ask yourself why that is. I'm just saying, and the world as it is, yes, thank you. Why would some deity have given us this life for the goal of it to be to escape it? How does that make any sense? That's never made any sense to me. To get philosophical here for a minute, because the guy is from the living philosophy, so this was kind of inevitable, but it's me, so I'm really more at home in philosophy than politics, if I'm honest. So here we are. I just really find any belief system that demands you abandon your life to be suspect, right? I find that suspicious, okay? So, and it's asceticism to me is like this very just like egotistical assertion of masculine values, right? You're going to tune out from the world to reach God. Because somehow if everybody would just shut up and let you think, you can figure this shit out. Sounds like my grandfather.
The revaluation of the feminine isn't a return to Victorian values. The man at work / woman at home structure of pre-womanism was still appallingly imbalanced. Of course, that begs the question, what would a post-industrial feminist society look like?
There it is. There it is. That's my favorite question. Phrased beautifully. What would a woman values-led world look like? We're never going to find out at this rate.
These are the questions of a new breed of feminism, one that is tied not to sex, but to the broader value systems of the masculine and the feminine.
But it is tied to sex, okay? Which is tied to reproduction, which is why this shit is important. Not just for the future of the species, but on an individual level. Only women can become pregnant, and then shit can completely derail your life or kill you. So, yeah, no. This shit is tied to sex. The psychological trait clusters are tied to sex. You demonstrated that. What the fuck are you saying?
One that is tied not to sex, but to the broader value systems of the masculine and the feminine.
Wait, but where the fuck do these value systems come from, dude? What is their root?
The more communitarian, compassionate, and yielding feminine values might just find their hour as the consequences of the imbalanced masculine value system come to full fruition.
Wouldn't that be nice?
True feminism wouldn't simply be about paying nurses as much as CEOs, or of changing societal attitudes towards being a stay-at-home parent. The revaluation of the feminine is a shift that would completely reorient our entire globalized ecosystem.
Yes, it would. Which is why certain actors really would not want that. To get conspiratorial for just a tiny second.
It's nothing short of a Nietzschean revaluation of all values.
There's Nietzsche again, being all girly up in this place. I love it so much. It's just so funny.
Now, what that revaluation would look like and how that would be achieved is obviously beyond the scope of this video, but I hope you found the idea thought-provoking.
That is literally the crux of my personal feminist philosophy journey. Okay, what exactly are feminine values? Empathy and long-term planning? I can get behind both of those things. They would both be really beneficial if everybody started, nurturing them in themselves, don't you think? Feminism has rejected all things associated with women, which has always struck me as odd. And I'm not the only one. Wouldn't it be nice if we could try, even have this discussion? We can't even have this discussion. And that's been true for a long time, because as he said, difference feminism fell out of favor 40 fucking years ago. Like around the time that I was born, I guess. Yay. So, that conversation has been over for a long time, and now we're not even allowed to talk about women as a group without including trans women who don't have most of the material needs that women do as women, as a group, and certainly do not share the psychological profile. No. Based on, and I say this based on my own observation and the fact that according to crime statistics, apparently they retain a male pattern of criminal behavior after transition. So, yeah, not women. But that's another video. So to summarize, which I may have already done, what would a post-industrial feminist society look like? That's the question of the hour, isn't it? That's what we should all be worried about, isn't it? What would a woman-led world fucking really look like? And what does that mean? These are important questions. These are urgent questions for feminist philosophy. They are the questions, in my opinion, for feminist philosophy. These are the questions that I've been asking, phrased better, or more precisely, or more verbosely, depending. I look forward to the live stream tomorrow where we get to discuss this, because ooh, it's gonna be a fun and spicy one, I can already tell. Thank you so much for joining me, Rad Mom, out here in my garden on this lovely late spring evening with the living philosophy and his Nietzschean revaluation of feminism. And join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. for the live stream. Those are always fun, and this one's going to be especially good, I think. And yeah, maybe we'll do Jesse Gender next week. Maybe, if I can get through it. Oh my god, that guy can't. I've known too many people just like him. He reminds me of my ex-brother-in-law. Like a lot, I think is what it is. Anyways, yeah. I've been Rad Mom. Thank you so much for joining me. Kind of a longer one today, but I think it was worth it. And I will see you next time. Bye.